I'm Ed Heil, and you're listening to Crushing Club Marketing. Today, we're talking about storytelling for your club. Every club has hundreds of stories that can communicate your brand and help people understand the why behind your club, what you stand for, and what makes you unique. In this episode, we'll help you understand why stories are so important. We'll help you uncover your stories and talk about ways to share them with your members and your prospective members. Well, thanks for listening in today. I'm Ed Heil, and today I'm going to be solo casting, which means I'm a solo act, which means I hope I'm able to keep your attention for the entire episode, and hopefully we will. It's a good conversation around storytelling for your club, and it's a talk that I'm very familiar with, and I've had the opportunity to share with people in various venues in the club industry, and so we're going to cover a lot of ground today. We are going to talk a little bit about why storytelling and what it is about storytelling that has becomes, what's made it so popular in some ways in the marketing world, and why does it matter to your club? We're going to actually go through some different examples today of what I like to call commercials and compare them with stories, and talk a little bit about how you might be producing more commercials than you are actual stories, recognizing them, knowing the difference, and then suggesting some ways that you can actually start creating more stories. We'll talk about what makes a story worth telling. How do you uncover those stories? So what are the things that you can do to really uncover those stories? And then how do you make them actionable? How do you get those stories from, inside people's heads into a place where you can share them with other members or with your prospects who may be considering your club or may consider having an event at your club? Lastly, we're going to talk a little bit about distribution of the stories as well. So where do the stories go? Where do you put them? Once you've found these great stories, now what? And then how do you make them really work for you? So we'll touch on that as well. The intent today is to help introduce you to the concepts. We won't go super deep into any of the areas, but hopefully enough that will help you to put some things in action and get some things in place. So let's start from the top with storytelling. It has become popular vernacular in the marketing world, and why not, right? We all love stories. We love great jokes. We love people who are able to tell great stories, but we especially like the stories that inspire us and the stories that make us feel something. And for marketers, they know that people remember stories and that they share them. We're going to talk a little more about that in just a couple of minutes here. And on the surface, you think about storytelling, and it seems, almost like a duh. No kidding. People remember them and they share them. But then sometimes you'll hear people talking about storytelling as part of their marketing strategy, and they'll say, yes, we totally agree with your belief in sharing stories, and we here have a fabulous story of value. We have a fabulous story of variety. We have an unbelievable story of activities. Boy, we have a fantastic story to tell about our membership, okay? And a lot of times, they aren't really stories. I mean, I don't know about you, but these are not the kind of stories that, make you, happy, sad. They usually don't evoke an emotion. I mean, I don't know about you, but I have not read a book or ever seen a movie that was a memorable story of value. I don't know that I've ever gotten that out of a film or a book that I've read, unless I was trying to read a story on value, but you get the idea. To the contrary, stories have a plot. Stories have a main character, right? And those kinds of stories that have conflict and resolution with their main character, they are memorable if they're told well, and they can even be highly emotional. But these are the stories that will evoke empathy. They'll make them memorable, and In fact, there will also be stories that people can share. They're not stories about value, I promise you that. And they're the stories that your members and that your prospective members are drawn to and that they'll remember long after the initial interaction with that story. The best stories are really about people. And if you think about it, you know this to be true. You probably haven't seen great movies or read great books about a building, about one event. It's usually about how that main character interacted with the event or lived in that building or worked in that building or things like that. But great stories are always about people. And the last time I checked, and I don't know your club specifically probably, but all clubs have a ton of stories on them in them. And if you think about it, every person at your club, whether they're an employee, whether they're a member, they all have their unique story. Even your vendors, your partners, people that do business with you, support you, they have stories to tell because every person has a story. Now, before you go diving into, trying to figure out how to uncover these unique stories, let's just take a second and talk about why storytelling. So we want to dive into this concept just briefly for a second. One of the reasons that storytelling has become so popular in marketing, so many people talk about storytelling, is that we remember stories better than we remember marketing messages. Since the beginning of time, we've passed stories from generation to generation to generation. They're rich, they're vibrant. If you've heard great stories of the past and maybe your family has some incredible stories, boy, you can almost see the characters in your mind's eye, right? I mean, you know what they look like. You understand their struggle, what they went through. And there's great reason for this. And without going into, all the physiology of this, because I'm not a physiologist, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a neurosurgeon, but I have read enough to make me dangerous. And what I've learned is that memorable stories that are emotional, cause your body to release a chemical in your brain called oxytocin. And oxytocin is the primary chemical that is produced when empathy exists. So a powerful story is able to create more empathy in the reader or in that viewer. And it's unbelievably powerful, and it sticks with people because that empathy will create a memory that burns in people's minds. So there's actually some real scientific reason why storytelling is so important. And yet the greatest challenge for all organizations, businesses, nonprofits, is that it's really, really hard to tell a powerful story. It's really, really hard. And if you think about whether that's in a commercial, the reason it falls flat in commercials is because they have like 30 seconds to tell a life story, and that's just not going to happen, right? But besides that, we get tripped up in details sometimes that are just unimportant. And what's really interesting, and I've had the opportunity to produce hundreds of videos in my career. I mean, probably, I don't know, dare say thousands, but a lot of videos, right? And what's really interesting is that what I've found is that no one else's story is as interesting as your story. For example, how many times have you been to an event and watched a video and thought, oh my gosh, this is so uninteresting and so boring and it's gone on way too long? You know, it's like if you ever go to nonprofit events or galas, it's not uncommon to see those kind of videos in those events. And you're like, some are really well told, but some are real yawners. And after a while, you're going, oh my gosh, this has got to end, right? But to that organization, they walk away going, that was a fabulous video. And it was fabulous because we got to talk about ourselves through the whole thing. And hopefully everyone understood all the things that we do. And it's so important. And so very often we let all of our own interests and the messages that we want to communicate get in the way of sharing a really, really good story. So let's just take that, flip it over for a second. Let's talk about the consumer. Let's talk about us as consumers. Because the thing that always blows me away is that we can sit there as consumers and say, man, Ed, you're right. That's exactly how I feel. And boy, I don't like stories of value either. But something really weird happens when it becomes our turn to become the marketer and the person who has to get people to engage with our brand. We do all sorts of crazy stuff, don't we? We start thinking, oh man, we got to tell them about this. We got to make sure we tell them about our new tennis courts that went in. Ooh, we got to make sure we tell them about how we seeded all the fairways 2 years ago and how perfect they are. We got to make sure but really, is that what you really need to tell them? Because you and I both know that when you get down to it, and I've had these conversations with you before or with people who know you, you say this: it's about our people. Our membership is about relationships, and it's about building those relationships. And if that's the case, and you know that to be true, like you really know this, then why aren't we creating more stories that help people engage and get to know each other in a deeper way so that there is a foundation for really strong relationships? Instead, what a lot of clubs do, and it's, again, this is something that all businesses do, we focus on events, we focus on things, we focus on features, but we really don't focus on the relationship. So that's where stories can be super, super valuable. So I talk about commercials and I talk about stories. I talk about marketing BS. And marketing BS is something that I think of it, which is just like, it's not a real story. It's just someone trying to sell something. And what I know for a fact is that we as a society have become really, really good at sniffing out marketing BS. And the funny thing is that media has trained us this way. When I was growing up, and I'm 52 years old, when I was growing up, we would watch television shows, right? With commercials. And what we did is we'd watch the show, and then when a commercial came up, that's when we would go to the bathroom, get something to eat, run upstairs to our bedroom and get something that we need, or a blanket or slippers or whatever that is. It's a time where you left the programming, right? And so today, we know very clearly what a commercial is and what the actual story or what the actual content, what the actual show is. I know it sounds super remedial, but again, we have this tendency as marketers, not just in club marketing, but in all marketing, to want to sell and want to produce commercials rather than to tell stories, rather. So one of the things that I'd like to have you do is make a goal for yourself, and make it a goal for your internal and external communications to be more stories, to create stories that actually make your audience, whether that's your members, whether it's prospective members, make them want to read your content. Make them want to say, oh, wow, who's going to be featured in the member spotlight this week? Who's going to be featured as part of that Mother's Day story that we always do? Who's going to be featured as the recipient of a certain award that we give out every year? I'm just making up stuff, obviously. How do you do that? How do you create that kind of interest level in your membership or even in prospective members? We'll get into some of the prospective member stuff in a little bit later. Because the hard thing is today, so much club communication is filled with commercials. And they're disguised with fancy graphics and long explanations of the events and what we're going to do and what we're going to have. And the Easter Bunny's going to show up, and then we're going to have a helicopter drop, goodies from the sky, and the kids will go nuts, and everyone will be happy, right? And we'll just show you pictures from last year's event and hope that that's enough to really make you care a lot. It's nice information. It's great to know that the helicopter's coming again. Hopefully it doesn't crash. It's great to know that we're going to have this thing, but it's not engaging and it's not sharing stories. So how do we do this? I've got a couple of examples I want to share to help frame this up for you. And In this example, I'm going to talk about stories being the real content, the thing that we could really be writing about and sharing. And then the commercials, which is more of what probably a lot of us do today, and maybe a different treatment of it. And let's use the newsletter as a backdrop for it, okay? One of the things that you see, especially here in the north around the springtime, is signing up. Sign up for junior golf. Sign up for lessons. Sign up for a golf camp. I mean, what parent isn't thinking about the activities they're going to get their kids involved in, right? So, hey, if you haven't signed up, make sure you do that, right? And we'll have nice pictures of the kids and show that there are a lot of kids out there and things like that. That's awesome. And it's important information that people need to know. But what if we did this? What if as part of that, so the commercial for the summer golf camp lives off to the side, but there's a piece on Abby Johnson, and Abby is the daughter of Bill and Sarah Johnson. And Abby actually grew up in our golf program. And you know what? Abby won the state golf tournament, or Abby earned a scholarship to play golf at, enter name here, local college or university. And maybe it's not that grand. Maybe it's Abby grew up in a junior golf program and is now the CEO of a company. This is how valuable golf was to her. And you tell her story, not Abby, you tell, it could be Abby, but you tell that person's story. So there are different levels of storytelling in that, and whether it's a child who's super successful or someone who's aspiring. But the idea is to connect that commercial, or what is essentially that event, with an actual person at your club. I'll give you a staff example. This is an example that I saw, that I came across while doing a workshop for a club in New England last year that I thought was just terrific. And there are two gentlemen who work in, as part of the kitchen staff, the dining staff. But they are, one was like a sous chef, and another person was working in the kitchen in some capacity. But they didn't know each other before they got to the club. But it turns out that the two men were from the exact same hometown in South America. And they just happened to end up at the same club. And the chances of these two both making it out of their community and living and working in the United States was remarkable. And that they ended up in the same town at the same club was really, really unique. Great story that had been untold. And because people knew it was cool, but they didn't really see it as being a story. We'll talk about recognizing stories in a second. I'll give you one other example that I love, which is the story that happens every year, and yet we always talk about the event, but not the stories behind it. And I think Mother's Day, Easter's pretty good too, but Mother's Day is one of those opportunities that I think is one of the great lost opportunities of storytelling for clubs. Here's why. Everyone loves a story about mom. Everyone loves a story about someone's mom. So we know that your club is going to have a Mother's Day brunch because it always does. It always has and probably always will, and that's great. And maybe you have some new wrinkles every year. Maybe there's something that you do different in the event. How moms are recognized, maybe their corsages, whatever that is, right? It's a great event. But rather than having some of those details in the newsletter that, hey, join us for Mother's Day brunch, it's going to start at 8 o'clock or whatever, run till 3 or 10 to 3 or whatever that is, right? You're going to have that information as a commercial. It'll live off to the side. Maybe it'll live at the bottom of the story, but it'll be somewhere that's visible so people can't miss it and they know that you're having it. Because, my gosh, the last thing you want to do is, not let people know when it's happening, and that's important information. Yet the story opportunity might just be, let's stay with the Johnson family, shall we? Sarah Johnson. We want to do a story on Sarah Johnson because this has been an exceptional year for Sarah Johnson. She has battled more adversity, overcome more difficult situations in this past year, and we salute Sarah because of all that she's endured, all that she's been able to accomplish, all that she survived, whatever that case may be, whatever that storyline is. You could take nominations from members for who this person should be in the newsletter, but you write that story about Sarah. You're not writing it about 5 moms. You're not writing it about 3 moms. You're going to focus on one mom, and you're going to tell that story really, really well. And you're going to make people who read that go, wow, I can't imagine what that must have been like for her. And you know what? Maybe you know Sarah at the club, but maybe you don't. And if you don't know Sarah, there's a very good chance that the next time you see Sarah, you're going to say, wow, we've not met before. I'm Ed. I just want to tell you, I read that story about you, and I was crying at the end of it. Man, that was something else. And you know what? There's going to be a different level of relationship between those people going forward. There'll probably be a different level of appreciation for that person, for Sarah, going forward. But the point is, it's an opportunity to really help people to get to know your membership in a different way. Hang on to that example. I'm going to come back to the Sarah Johnson newsletter story when we get to distribution, because that's a story that has legs that go well beyond your club, that go out into the community, that go out into your referral network. So we'll come back to that one in a couple minutes. So let's go to storytelling in general and the elements of a really, really good story, okay? All great stories share some common characteristics, and you know what they are because you've seen all the movies, but maybe haven't labeled them. They all have one main character. That's why we have a Best Actor award. That's why we have a Best Actress award, because there is one character that the story revolves around. There are supporting characters or a supporting cast. So that's why we have at the Oscars Best Supporting Actor or Actress. There's conflict or there's tension. There's some level of angst that's in that movie. And whether it's a comedy or whether it is a rom-com or a drama, there is some level of conflict or tension. It is the thing that makes you stay engaged with the movie. It's the element that makes you say, how is this going to end, right? It's the conflict or the tension. Then it's conflict resolution. Oh, wow, that's how it ends. That is terrific. And then hopefully there's positive outcome. So that was terrific. So all great stories have a main character, a supporting cast, tension or conflict, resolution of that conflict, and a positive outcome. Maybe not great stories. Great stories probably have it, but all stories that are worth telling have those elements. And without them, really, really hard to tell a story that people are going to care about. It's really, really hard to... That tension is what makes you care so much about the character. That's why we cry in movies, because it's like, oh my gosh, I can't imagine what it must be like for that person. And we connect with them through that tension, right? So you're sitting there going, yeah, I get it, but I don't know if we have those kind of stories at my club. You do. Sometimes it's just trying to figure out where they are. And then the hard part might be twisting some arms to get people to share those stories. But here's one thing I know about people. They love talking about themselves. They love sharing stories about themselves. And if they've done an incredible thing like that, there's a very good, not like that, but they've done something really, really cool, they're going to share it with you. Not all people, but a lot of people will. So this is probably one of the trickiest things is really finding the stories, uncovering them. When I was a TV news reporter for 12 years. I did sports for most of my career, but I also did a little bit of morning news. And what was funny about being a TV news reporter is that people thought that they knew you, so they'd come up to you on the street and had all sorts of funny suggestions and tell you they thought you were taller than you actually are. And so one of the things people do is they come up and they say, Ed, I got a great story for you. And in the beginning, I was always like, yeah, cool. What is it? And after a while, you're like, I know it's not going to be a good story because most people don't have a great sense for storytelling. And it's not that they can't, but a lot of people just think that because their son did something incredible or their husband or a friend or something like that, that it should be a great story. And it might be a great story, but it's going to take some digging, and very often it's really not a wonderful story. So let's dive into a little bit more about uncovering stories and helping you to understand what might make a really good story. We talked about a couple of examples, but when you're starting from ground zero, the idea of building a repository of stories in your club can be really, really daunting because you're going, I got nothing. Not only do you got nothing, but you got no process to get these stories either, which is even more difficult because you're saying, how am I going to get this? So I'm going to help you do that right now. So let's start with this. There's really good news for you. You've got hundreds of stories. And I know that because there are people that belong to your club, and there are people that work at your club, and there are people that are associated with your club through various partnerships. And whenever people are involved, there's a very good chance that there are stories there. So in order to do that, the first thing you need to do is talk to your team. And first of all, make them aware of what you're doing and what you're hoping to get from this. We are mining for stories, people, about our members and about our staff that are going to make people say, wow, that's really cool. I didn't know that. And they might look at you cross-eyed and go, yeah, how am I going to do that? But you know what? They know. Look at your department heads. Look at anyone who comes in contact with your members, anyone who comes in contact with vendors, anyone, your staff as they interact with each other, coworkers. Whenever people are gathered and talking, all we want them to do is pay attention to the stories that the people have, to the stories of their lives. Maybe there's adversity, maybe there's incredible joy that they've had in their life, but ask your people to start paying attention to the stories around them. Could be the person at the bag drop, could be a server in your dining room, could be your member services staff person. It could be any of those people. Anyone who is talking to the people who might have stories are a potential source for your stories as a club marketer, communicator, general manager, okay? So in the news world, one of the things that we did on a regular basis, and they still do, of course, is they have editorial meetings. In TV news, there are two a day. There's a morning editorial meeting and there's an evening editorial meeting because because of the way the daily news cycle works. You don't need to have two editorial meetings a week. You could have one editorial meeting as frequently as you typically work as department heads. This is going to be your opportunity to create a culture of listening for stories and sharing them among the team. So how does this work? We've done this, I've done this as part of a workshop, and I'm going to share with you how I've done this and how it works. When you start talking about creating stories, member stories, and things like that, people will look at you and say, oh my gosh, really? Another thing I've got to do, right? And you might even be saying, when are we going to do this? How am I going to get these stories from people? It's going to take too long. We already have our people in too many meetings, things like that, right? So what I would recommend is add 15 minutes to one of your pre-existing department head meetings and make that your editorial session. And here's how this is going to work, is that maybe it's you. Maybe it's someone that you work with who oversees your club communications, your newsletter, your e-blasts. Maybe it's you, maybe it's someone else. But assign maybe that person or someone else to be the managing editor of your stories, okay? And we'll get it, and I'll just say it now and relieve the tension of your blog. Okay, we'll start with that. The managing editor for your club's blog. And I know you're going, we don't have a blog. You will, but we'll get to that in a second. So make him your managing editor of your newsletter for right now. But anyway, So they're the person who's going to say, bring your ideas to the table, and then you're going to discuss them as a group. In a workshop that I've done on several occasions, what we do is I give people 10 minutes to think of one story at the club. Just give me one story that you know of at the club, and I'll give you 10 minutes to think about it. And people always do it. They always come back with a story in usually less than 10 minutes. We did this in one group. We had about 20 people. In 10 minutes, we had 20 stories. We had 20 unique stories because people just, off the top of their head, they came up with these stories. We went around the table, and everyone shared the story with the group. Pretty powerful stuff. So here's the one thing that you absolutely have to make mandatory as part of this process, is that when you tell your staff and you challenge them to go find these stories and to share them with you, that you make sure that they're stories about people. And typically, one person. Remember, we talked about this. Now, there's that great story about the two guys working in the kitchen. There's a story about their friendship and relationship. Even one of those people could be more of the main story, the main character. And I'll go to the person who maybe had the most adversity in their journey. But regardless, it's got to be about a person and not about, I just want to, the renovation project is finally wrapped up, and it was a team of people who chipped in. That's not a bad story, by the way, just to be clear, but it's probably not the type of story that we're looking for in this. But even if you're going to take that, a little tangent on this, then let's tell the story of someone in that renovation project who's maybe a really key player, a really pivotal person, maybe someone who really helped pull it together or get it done in the end. So back to the issue at hand, the managing editor is the person who is going to take in all the stories, write them down, and if need be, vet those stories. Ask second-level questions. Boy, that story about Stephen sounds really interesting, but I'm not sure I totally get the point. So what was it that happened that made it, a struggle? Or tell me more about that. So I'm going to push back. And because you want to foster the creativity and the creative spirit, listen to all the stories. See if you can find a home for them. Some stories you may not be able to and not be able to make work. But in the creative process, if you're not someone who's been used to doing that, try to make sure that you're able to respect and include the stories that the people come up with. And I know I probably don't need to tell you that, but it is just one of those things. But the managing editor, boy, you are the guardian of the content. You are the person who's going to oversee that. And then assign those stories to the different people. This can be a good thing if you have someone who's already writing copy for you in some way in your club. You may be able to deploy them as sort of a club reporter. Otherwise, maybe the people who bring the story to the table are also willing to write those stories for you. Another thing, just as a side note, some of these could also be terrific video ideas. So a little bit there and just how to mine for those stories, how to bring them to life, and hopefully that's helpful for you. The last thing we're going to talk about is distribution of these stories and how do you get these stories to people who will see it and people who will care about it. And I want to address this in two different ways. I want to address this from the internal communications perspective, which I think we've been talking quite a bit about today, and mostly about internal. But what you also need to realize is that these stories are also a terrific way to engage people who are not members or who are prospective members of your club. And this can be done in a few different ways that we're going to go into. Through your emails, follow-up emails with prospects, your e-blasts that go out to your members, the blog that you don't have that we're going to talk about in just a second, and then your social media channels. So those are the three things we're going to try to encompass in this discussion around distribution. And if you're like most clubs, I get it, I know it, you know it, I know it. You don't have a blog, right? And you go, Ed, we are not a blogging type of club. What you find is that you're probably right. And the other thing, though, is that most businesses that are driving a lot of organic search, so people who are just Googling stuff and finding their website, are blogging. Most successful businesses are driving people to their website through organic search, and a lot of them have blogs. A high percentage of companies who are really killing it in their marketing are blogging. All right, so that aside, blogging has got some benefits that I just want to share with you about. Number one, it's a terrific place and a natural place to put your stories. If you are a club that is actively trying to drive new membership, trying to hit revenue targets for event business, wedding business, as I mentioned, your golf, social memberships, a blog is a fantastic place to put information, content, stories, etc., in a location where people may find them by searching for the things that you do. You do this in your own world when you're home, you're looking for information on products and services. You Google certain things that will lead you to a page that has information about the things you want to buy. I mean, it's just how the world works today. We don't go to the yellow pages and look up stuff anymore. We go to Google and we look things up. So organizations that blog on a consistent basis have a better chance of being found for the things that they want to be found for. For example, best club in the metro area, best family club, junior golf for children, best places to host a wedding, romantic settings for weddings, things like that, whatever. Things you want to be found for. If you blog about those topics or related topics, you have a better chance of being found than your competition does. Really, really cool. So it has again, it's a home for your stories because those stories can have search benefits. The other thing is once you have that content on your blog, once you have those stories on your blog, what we highly recommend all clubs do is take those blogs and use those in your social media platforms, primarily in Facebook. So if you have a Facebook page that's public facing, take that story about Sarah Johnson and that incredible year she had and how difficult it was. And on Mother's Day, or maybe the day before Mother's Day, you say, here at Bushwood, we value all of our members. And today we salute all of our moms, especially Sarah Johnson. And you have a link to the blog and a nice image of Sarah's going to pop up. And what happens then, you all know how this works, is when we tag Sarah, it's going to go to Sarah's network. So all of Sarah's friends are going to see that, oh my gosh, there's a story about Sarah. So they're going to click on it. I would venture to guess that not all of Sarah's friends are only at the club, and there are people that know Sarah that don't belong to your club that would read that. And you're going to position that story in a way that shows great gratitude and humility for the club. And people will think, wow, that is so cool that her club recognized her in this way. And they're going to share it with people. They're going to like it. And that post is going to get more visibility. Really, really cool, really powerful, and a very simple way to take that one story and give it a lot more power. At the same time, like I was saying before, it lives on the blog. It's going on the Facebook page. So other members who may have seen Sarah, they know Sarah, they've bumped into her, or they know her husband, or whatever the case may be, there's a very good chance that when they see that post on Facebook and they read it, they're going to go up to Sarah and stop her and say, hey, I just saw that story about you. That was unbelievable. Man, thanks for inspiring me in such an amazing way, right? That's what you hope is going to happen from those stories. The other thing that from a distribution standpoint that you should keep in mind with a blog and why blogs are so powerful is that it becomes this receptacle of information. It becomes this like resource. It's like, imagine a digital brochure library that is filled with amazing stories of people at your club. And so let's just say that, you meet someone who, we'll stick with the Sarah Johnson theme, even though it's maybe a little bit different. But let's just say that you have a club that comes through someone who comes through the club, a couple that comes through the club, tours your club. And the guy is all gung-ho and he's giddy and he really wants to join. And his wife is maybe saying, I don't know, this isn't really my thing. I'm not like these people. They're all stuffy. They're all snobby. This isn't the right place for me. I wasn't a country club person. I don't feel comfortable here. I'm not going to fit in, right? And you know this because you're talking to them and you read her body language and then they leave. And as a follow-up email, you say, hey, you know what? I'm going to share with them this Mother's Day story. Maybe they came in just before Mother's Day. And you sent a note to, let's call them Bob and Christine. And you say, Bob and Christine, thanks so much for taking the time to come and visit us at Bushwood. We certainly hope you enjoyed the visit. I know that I enjoyed meeting with you as well. I know you have a lot of questions still about whether this is the right place for you and whether club life is for you or not. But I did want to share with you an amazing story of one of our members that I think you would relate to in a way because, like you, she has 3 children and is a mom that we value so deeply here at Bushwood. I hope you enjoy the story. You have the link, and they can then read it. And maybe Christine says, wow, that's really cool. Maybe they're not so snobby. Maybe that's not such a bad place. Maybe I just prejudged them just a little bit too quickly. So your blog content, the stories that you write for your blog, you take the hyperlink, you take the URL for it, you hyperlink it to text or in an email, you embed it, right? And you send it to people through emails. So your stories are able to live in several different ways. First and foremost, in your blog. They can also live in your newsletters, right? So if you're going, Ed, that's a bunch of hooey, we're not starting a blog, that's fine. Put them in your monthly, quarterly magazine or your, whatever kind of publication you have. Put it in there. But the point is, if it's digital, it's going to get shared, and it makes it really, really versatile. It will help you with organic search traffic, and those pieces can also be used as marketing collateral. And they can also be used as great social media content that can be shared through channels like Facebook that are so popular in what is most likely a target demographic for your area. Hopefully, this makes sense. If it doesn't make sense, then I would welcome any conversation around this. And if there's a way that I can help you to execute this, ways to help you ideate this, ways to help you by coming and speaking to your team, I'm happy to do that. You can reach me at ed@storytellermn.com. Again, that's ed@storytellermn.com. And I'd be happy to go into greater detail with you. Just keep in mind that the content that you're creating is a story. Try to make sure you think about content that you're considering for your communications and say, is it a story or is it a commercial? If it's a commercial, is there a story there? Can we go find a story? Leverage those editorial meetings, see if you can get those going, and make sure your people are focusing on the people and not just their activities and events. People who run departments like to promote their events, right? Have them think about the people who they want to have attend, and then find the stories that will be most interesting to those people. You can build powerful relationships through content, especially the content that connects with people's heart and with their mind. And content that is memorable and shareable. You can do this, and you can create a culture of sharing and engagement that is facilitated through some of these channels. So I hope that you find this helpful. I hope that it was a good investment in your time today, or as part of your workout. If you're on the treadmill, hopefully you had a good workout today. Next week, we are going to sit down and talk to Kevin McDonald. If you're a general manager, you're probably familiar with Kevin McDonald and his work. He is a fabulous speaker, and we're going to talk about communication. We're going to talk about ways to get what you want out of your career and out of the people that you work closely with. Thanks so much for joining us. We look forward to seeing you next time, and in the meantime, keep crushing your club marketing.